He's taken a very expansive view of executive authority and what the president can do. We see it with the tariffs. We saw it with DOGE. He's taken a lot of actions that presidents haven't done before, and they're being litigated. And one of the things that he's done is that he has tried to exert a lot of control over what used to be called independent agencies. So things like the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board. He has removed commissioners at these agencies, even though the statutes that govern these agencies have what's called a for-cause removal restriction, meaning the president can only remove them for cause. And he's just, firing them at will. He's also obviously threatened to do the same with Jerome Powell and maybe other members of the board. And his view is that the for-cause removal restriction is unconstitutional because it impinges on his power as the president under Article 2 of the Constitution to essentially oversee the entire executive branch. And the Supreme Court in 1935, there's precedent saying those for-cause removal restrictions are constitutional, but more recently, the Supreme Court has sort of tried to narrow that precedent and said, at least with a couple agencies where you only have one director, those for-cause removal restrictions are unconstitutional. And so the President Trump, is sort of trying to expand that recent precedent to these other agencies.
So do we have other, so the Federal Reserve is one thing. Do we have other agencies that are in the legal process now where someone's been removed and we have a suit?
Yeah, exactly. We actually have quite a few of them.
Okay.
He has fired 2 commissioners at the FTC. Those are in litigation. Sort of the most procedurally advanced cases at this point are cases where he fired commissioners at the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, and also the Merit Systems Protection Board, which sort of oversees federal employees and whether they're being fired and hired for merit or not. Those 2 cases, we have actually several rulings. And what's interesting is that the judges in those rulings sort of fall along ideological lines in how they rule. So the trial court judge was a judge appointed by President Obama, and she said that the firing of those commissioners was improper, that it was, it violated the for-cause removal. Those cases are now on appeal. There's going to be an argument next week, but we have sort of preliminary rulings from the appeals court. One panel of 3 judges, 2 of whom were appointed by Republican presidents, said that President Trump would have been likely to succeed on the merits. But then that ruling was then revisited by the entire court, which is dominated by judges appointed by Democrats, who said that the firing was improper. So we're sort of seeing how this might play out.
Are we really in a truly partisan judicial world, or is this just simply different interpretations or stricter or looser interpretations of the Constitution?
It depends on the issue.
Okay.
I would say on this issue, it seems like the judges are essentially ruling along ideological lines, where you have judges appointed by Republicans saying that the for-cause removal restriction really does impinge on the president's executive authority. And you have judges appointed by Democrats saying, it's okay to put some limits. The for-cause removal restriction would still allow the president to fire someone if they did something improper.
Timing of some of these cases, when are we going to get some clarity, do you think?
So next week we have a key hearing in the NLRB and Merit Systems Protection Board hearings. That's at the D.C. Circuit, which is sort of considered like the second most important court in the land after the Supreme Court. That's going to be just a panel of 3 judges, again, 2 of whom were appointed by President Trump, actually. So I expect that panel to rule for the president, after which point the commissioners will ask the full D.C. Circuit to review it. I expect that ruling to go in favor of the commissioners. That will probably come sometime in the summer. And then at that point, I would expect the Trump administration to ask the Supreme Court for review. But with all that said, there's this thing called a shadow docket at the Supreme Court. So some of these sort of more preliminary issues are already starting to surface at the Supreme Court. So there's a chance they take it earlier than I expect, but most likely it'll be in the fall.
So in terms of, say, the Supreme Court issuing a ruling that then is ignored, is there precedent for that, like over history?
Well, we've actually sort of seen it with TikTok, right? Where the Supreme Court upheld the TikTok ban, and the president instructed his attorney general to ignore the ruling and ignore the ban. So we have sort of started to see some issues like that. But in this case, I expect the Supreme Court to, on this issue generally, I expect the Supreme Court to side with President Trump.